Happy Friday, welcome back to Drinking by My Shelf. My name is Emma and this is Balancing the Books. Every month here on Drinking by My Shelf, I add up all of the books that I add to my TBR every month and all of the books that I remove from my TBR, usually by reading them, possibly by DNFing them or unhauling them, and I try and make those numbers balance. At the beginning of November, I started with 44 books on my TBR. So let's see what happened next. And while I tell you about all of the interesting books that I read this month, my bookshelf behind me is being very well lit, don't you think, by my Serious Light. My Serious Light is the very kind sponsor of this video, so I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my light and why it's so amazing later on in this video. But for now you can see this is the perfect light to light up this very cold, dark evening. I've got my hot Ribena and feeling pretty snuggly. The first book that I read this month was Plainsong by Haruf, which I was halfway through at the end of the month. So I had been reading this one last month for a video I did on reading the least popular books on my TBR. In that video, I kind of came up with a few different interpretations of what least popular might mean, whether it was lowest rated or just the least number of ratings. And Plainsong was the book that I had on my TBR unread for the longest. So by that definition, it's kind of the least popular with me. It was the one that I had the most chances to pick up and yet never had chosen to do so. However, I did actually have really high hopes for this book. I've read one other Haruf, which was called Our Souls at Night, and I really loved that book. I gave it 5 stars. This book I knew was set within the same fictional town, so I just thought I was going to love it. I'd heard it was beautiful, and unfortunately I didn't love it. I was kind of bored. I do think that Haruf's writing is beautiful. The second I started reading this, it reminded me so much of reading his previous book that I had loved, and I really like the kind of sparsity of the way that he writes. I just wasn't interested in these particular characters, or at least most of them, so this book follows a few different overlapping storylines. One of the storylines is about a teenage girl, Victoria, who's kicked out of her house when her mother finds out that she's pregnant, and she ends up with nowhere to go, and she is taken in by these two brothers, these two old bachelor brothers who work on a farm, and they are asked to take her in and they don't really know what to make of her. They've never really had women in their lives before, but they form a bond and they start to really, really care for her. And that storyline, gorgeous. That's the reason I didn't DNF this book, is because I was really enjoying reading about the brothers and the love that they develop for this girl, who they take on as a kind of daughter, and the love that she develops for them. That was lovely. Everything else just left me cold, so I found myself wanting to skip sections just to get back to the only storyline I was interested in. I also had to skip some sections even within that storyline, because there was a lot of descriptions of the brothers birthing cows and stuff. They work on a farm and you get a lot of quite graphic descriptions. At one point they do an autopsy of a horse. It's just not my vibe. Raf gave me a present this month, which was Our Missing Hearts by Celeste, and really annoyingly, I have left it at her flat and so I can't show it to you. It's a really lovely hardback book. It's even got a ribbon. I really wanted to hold it up and show you, but it looks like this, and I have actually just read it. She gave it to me at the beginning of the month. I only just read it. This book, again, was a bit of a disappointment to me, so I liked it a lot more than I liked Plainsong. Overall, I would say I really enjoyed Our Missing Hearts. But Celeste Ng as an author, I have given 5 stars to previously. I really, really loved her novels, and this felt very different, and it just didn't move me in the same way. Her 2 previous books were very much about family lives, and they're kind of deep dives into particular characters. Our Missing Hearts is instead a dystopian novel about a world not too far removed from our own, which is my favourite kind of dystopia, but it's a much grander scale. It's much more about this changing world rather than about diving into particular characters and their relationships with each other and the tiny minutiae of those relationships, which is what I've loved from her before. The characters in Our Missing Hearts I just never felt like I got to know in the same way. So for that reason it was a slightly disappointing book, but it was really, really interesting, and I do actually really want to recommend it as a book. So it's set in a world where there was a great, another Great Depression, basically. It was called The Crisis, in our not too far future, and the book is set in the States, and basically throughout the years of this crisis, when everyone's lives are just getting harder and harder, it is China and Chinese people that get scapegoated. And so a lot of general anti-Asian hate develops from this. And Celeste has said that she was inspired to write this during the pandemic when there was such a rise in anti-Asian racism. This book, you can tell, is filled with her rage from that, and it felt really scary to read because it felt plausible. Because the government essentially sign off this law, is that the right word? Thing called PACT, which is the Protection of American Culture, and then something beginning with T. And it's basically saying that it is their mission, that they have all of these policies that are designed to help protect American culture and protect Americans from China. And that is kind of spread to include basically all East Asian people. People are named PAOs. They are a person of Asian origin. There is a lot of racism that is suddenly seemingly allowed. And that did all feel really scary to read. The government not saying that they're condoning racism, but condoning racism. That felt like something so real and so plausible in our not too distant future, if not already. So for that reason, I would say it was a really, really interesting book, and I would really recommend it. It's just not what I had been excited about from a Celeste Ng, because she's a particularly favourite author for a particular thing. I got another present from Raf, which was Small Things Like These by Clare Keegan, which was shortlisted for the book of this year, and I haven't yet read this one, but it is 100 pages? It's just over 100 pages, so this should not take me long to storm through. Raf actually said that she liked it and didn't love it, but that because it was such a short book, it was really worth reading. It's set in 1985 in an Irish town during the weeks leading up to Christmas. I did not realise it was set at Christmas. I need to read this book this month. Next, another book that I forgot to bring home from the office and show physically to you, got a lot of gaps in the books I have physically this month, is Meet Me Under the Mistletoe, which is a book that I hauled this month and read this month, and that was all for work. I filmed a buddy reading vlog with one of my colleagues. I will link that below. It's over on Book Break, the channel that I run for work, and we had a really fun day basically travelling around London, reading this book together and sampling hot chocolate and mulled wine and like a hot apple thing that Waterstones did, like a non-alcoholic thing. That was really yummy. We were going to get mince pies, but Caroline doesn't like mince pies, and we kind of ran out of time. Funny enough, go watch that video and see if you can tell. That was actually a day right in the middle of my food poisoning. If you watched my Sad Boy Books vlog, you will see that I had a very extended bout of food poisoning, or perhaps a virus, I don't know. I was sick for many days, and one of those days I woke up thinking I felt better, and so I went on this day with Caroline, filmed this vlog. I don't think you can tell how ill I was, but it was a big mistake to have had the hot chocolate and the apple thing and the mulled wine, because I was then sick all night. I haven't told you anything about the book. Meet Me Under the Mistletoe by Jenny Bayliss is a Christmas rom-com. So as you know, I don't really read romances. I've got 2 romances, spoiler alert, I'm going to tell you about in this vlog that I read last month. But Meet Me Under the Mistletoe was the first one, and I did enjoy it. So it's not my favourite genre. I don't love reading romances, but I thought it was really sweet, and we had a lot of fun reading it. It's about a woman who is going to a high school reunion, basically, or a school reunion. One of her friends is getting married, so the rest of them gather at this castle in the build-up to the wedding, and while she's there, she meets the sexy gardener who she used to know back when she was at school, so there's a romance there. There's also a lot of complications with her friendship group. There's a lot of class tension, basically, between the friends and our main character's family. There's a lot of arguments about privilege, so all of that was very interesting. There's also a lot of discussion of mental health. One of the friends had taken their own life a few years before, and so isn't there, and they refer back to him a lot and talk about various ways that different members of the friendship group have now been trying to take better care of their mental health. So there's a lot to dive into there. I enjoyed it. It's getting darker and darker outside. My serious light is having to work overtime, so this feels like a good time to draw your attention to this gorgeous light that I've got here. This is my Serious Light. I've had this for coming up on a year now. You may have seen it in quite a few videos. It's a lifesaver. If you're someone like me who reads a lot, and I imagine being here on this channel that you are, it is really important to have good lighting to read those books by. And all of the lights in the Serious Lights range utilize this daylight wavelength technology, and they basically emulate as close as possible to the experience of reading by daylight. So it's really, really good for your eyes. The lights are also totally customizable. When you order one, you can choose the color that you want, whether you want it to be a table light or a floor light, whether you want it to be cordless. Mine is cordless. So I carry it around, which is great, really recommend. You can choose the type of metal, you can choose the type of base, you can choose if you're not from the UK, even though they're a British company, they can create it with whatever plug you need for your country. They ship internationally, free international shipping, so wherever you are in the world, this is a great light for you. And to make things even better, I have a reward code for you. If you use my code DBMS12, then with every order of a light in the Serious Lights range, you will get a free compact light, and they're worth £150, and they're really, really gorgeous mini lights. I use mine as my bedside light. It's absolutely brilliant for reading late at night, which I do a lot of. I highly recommend getting one of these lights. Oh, and they're adjustable, so you can change how bright the light is. Depending on the model you get, you can adjust the beam, how wide or narrow it is. It's a very snazzy light. Okay, I already mentioned that I did a Sad Boy Books vlog, so you can go and watch that. In that vlog, I read 2 books about sad boys. I hauled both of these books, and I read both of these books. And these were Sparrow by James Hynes and Shuggie Bane by Douglas Stuart. And yeah, they were both very sad. Sparrow is kind of a Roman adventure story with a twist. So this is set in ancient Spain, and it's about a young boy whose name we don't know. He grows up in a brothel being cared for by the cook of the brothel and by the wolves, which is what they call the sex workers at the brothel. One of the wolves in particular becomes his mother figure, and the love between mother and son is really the driving force of this book. It's so beautiful and powerful to read about. Euterpe is the name given to this woman who takes care of him. It's not her real name, but it's the name. It's what they're all named after muses. So Euterpe is the one who looks after the little boy, who I will call Sparrow. It's not his name, but he is nicknamed Sparrow amongst many other nicknames because Euterpe teaches him this story about a sparrow being free, not being able to be caught and be made a slave. And so as terrible things start to happen to this little boy as he grows up, and it gets so distressing to read about, he is able to imagine himself as a sparrow and sort of in his mind fly away from the terrible things that are being done to his body. He can fly away and imagine himself free. It's absolutely heartbreaking. But it's also pretty action-packed. That's why I said it feels kind of like a Roman adventure story. And it gets to the end of this book and it feels like there is more coming. I really want to find out if this book is going to be a series, because it feels like there's so much more left in his story. The book is narrated by himself as an old man looking back on his life, but we only see those first few years of his life. By the end of the book, he is still a very young boy, and so I want to know what happens next. There's a lot of gaps missing in how he ended up being this old man who we're hearing from at the end of the story. I want to fill in those gaps. So it's a book I really want more from. It's coming out in May next year, so keep your eye out for this one. Shaggy Bane is a book that I am late to the party on. This book won the Booker Prize in 2020. I'm only just reading it. It's one of our biggest books at work. Have I not read it before? And it really is as good as everyone says it is. This one is about another sad little boy, a little boy called Shuggie growing up in Glasgow. And again, it's about a mother-son relationship. Shuggie's mother, Agnes, is a woman who is very, very beautiful and very troubled, and to whom life has not been kind. She's had a series of relationships that have ended up bringing her to this very dark place, and she becomes an alcoholic and becomes unable to care for her children. But the book doesn't villainize her at all. A lot of the book is actually centered more on her than it is on young Shaggy, though he's the youngest boy of the family and the one who sticks with her for the longest and has the most hope for the longest that she will be able to turn things around. And actually you get these moments of hope throughout the book, and they're the worst part. The hope is what destroys you the most, because you keep thinking that things are going to get better, but Agnes just can't get better. That's not to say the book isn't hopeful overall. It does have this hopeful ending. I won't tell you too much about what happens, but yeah, it's a book that I really, really loved. I can see why it's been so raved about, and it's really about this woman who you care for so much, and you watch her try and try and try again and try again, but at the same time let her children down again and again and again. But I just I never once blamed her. I mentioned that I read another romance this month. I did. I read The Holiday Swap by Maggie, Knox, and this one I read for the Love Hate Christmas challenge that I did with Emma Tobias, and that video is live now. I will link to it below so you can go check it out. We've done this video several times now. We always set each other challenges based around one thing that we love and one thing that we hate from different categories, and the other person then has to go and try those things, read that book, watch that film, and guess which one was the love and which one was the hate. And as part of that, we buddy read a book called The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox, which was another Christmas romance, and another one that I really enjoyed. Do I love Christmas romance now? The Holiday Swap is about twins, Cassandra and Charlie, who are living very different lives. One of them runs a bakery in the small town where they grew up, and the other one, Charlie, has gone to LA and is the host of a baking show. I just watched Great British Bake Off for the first time. Speaking of being late to the party on things, this was the first year I watched it and I really enjoyed it. So I really liked reading this book as kind of a continuation of my Great British Bake Off journey. I also kind of chose it because it reminded me of the plot of The Princess Switch, which is an excellent Christmas movie which involves swapping places and also involves baking. I haven't got to the swapping places bit yet. Cass and Charlie end up swapping places because Charlie suffers a head injury, she gets a concussion, she loses her sense of smell and taste, and so she can't do the finale of this baking show, so she convinces her twin sister to swap places with her. And of course, it doesn't always play out the way they hoped. Things keep going wrong for each of them, but also things go right. They each meet a sexy new person in their new swapped lives who they fall in love with, but while that person thinks they're the other twin. As the book went on, they get themselves more and more into this pickle, and I did find it very hard to read. I just was relieved when everything got sorted out. I wanted all of the truth to be out there in the air, no matter what the consequences, because all of the lying was stressing me out. But yeah, it was a really fun, cute book. And then finally, I hauled 2 books. I hauled The Marriage Act by John Mars. This is a thriller that's set in the same universe as The One by John Mars, which is the only other John Mars book that I've read. John Mars is pretty popular here on BookTube. People love his thrillers. And I liked The One. It was kind of a dating dystopia. And The Marriage Act is kind of a follow-up set within that same universe. So in this book, marriage has now become something that the government pushes on people, and having a good marriage is kind of obligatory by law, so the government actually monitors people's marriages, has speakers in their homes, and so to love, honour and obey is now written in the law. I enjoyed The One. I read it a few years ago and I thought it was, you know, a kind of trashy page turner. I enjoyed it. So I brought a proof of The Marriage Act home from work. And finally, I hauled This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub. In a vlog coming at the end of December, you will find out why I actually hauled this book twice. But I was recommended this book when I did my video about my ingredients for a perfect book. This one was recommended to me as a time travel book that I would really enjoy. I love time travel. I've started this one. I won't tell you too much about it because I haven't got very far, and so I'll do a proper wrap up next month. But this is my 3rd Emma Straub book. I've really enjoyed her writing in the past, and this one shows every sign of being my favourite one yet, especially because it's got time travel in it. But I haven't got to the time travel yet, but I'm very excited for when I do. Where I just got to had a hint that it was coming. Adding up all of that, that means that I hauled 8 books onto my TBR throughout November, and I only read 6 of them. So to balance my books, I've got to get rid of another 2. Please hold, I need to decide which 2. Okay, I'm back. I have got 2 books here which were given to me by one of my colleagues. She was doing an unhaul of her books and she decided that these 2 weren't ones that she was going to keep, but that she liked them enough to like vaguely recommend them to me. So I could take them if I wanted them, but she was unhauling them. So they didn't come with like the most glowing recommendation, and so I think they're a fairly easy 2 to part with. I'll just take them to charity, which was what she was going to do in the first place anyway. This is When She Was Bad, which is a thriller about some colleagues. One of them is capable of murder. I'm sure it's really fun. This one is The Newlyweds, which I think is about like a mail-order bride. I'm sure it's actually really interesting, but like I said, they just didn't get glowing recommendations to me, and this particular colleague knows my reading taste very well, so I really trust her when she recommends a book specifically for me, and seeing as she didn't, I'm not going to read these. So that wasn't too painful, and now my books are balanced again. Once again, don't forget to click my link in the description box below if you want to go and order your own Serious Light, and use my code DBMS12 to get a free compact light with every order of one of the lights in the Serious Lights range. And let me know in the comments below what you have been reading over the last month, and if there's anything that you would recommend to me. And I'll see you next time.
It's the end of the year. Everywhere on TV, couples and Christmas trees, gift wrapping and cheer. Just the worst time to be